FIFA officially reported 44,985 fans for the South Korea versus Czech Republic match at Estadio Akron in Guadalajara, a 45,664-seat stadium, which means the official record accounts for just 679 empty seats on that afternoon. The broadcast cameras covering that match showed something the number cannot accommodate. Visible, stretching sections of unoccupied seats spread across multiple areas of the ground, and the gap between that official figure and what millions of television viewers watched is exactly what needs pulling apart. Picture Estadio Akron on a World Cup afternoon, one of the most carefully prepared venues at this tournament, a 45,664-seat ground that Mexico spent years readying for the global stage, with broadcast cameras running live to millions of viewers and South Korea taking on Czech Republic in a FIFA World Cup group stage fixture. The cameras showed it plainly: entire sections of empty seats, visible patches of unoccupied rows spread across multiple areas of the ground, not a handful of late arrivals working their way to their spots, but clearly vacant stands stretching far enough to register on every wide-angle broadcast shot the production team put out. Then the official figure arrived: 44,985. Working through what that number requires takes only a moment. With the stadium holding 45,664 and the official count at 44,985, the implied gap lands at 679 empty seats, which translates to 99.4% occupancy. The kind of figure that would leave a ground looking genuinely full to any observer inside or outside it. At 99.4% capacity, you might notice the one empty seat in your own row before kickoff and forget about it before the first whistle. What the broadcast cameras showed at Estadio Akron was not a venue operating at 99.4%, and a claimed figure that diverges that sharply from observable visual evidence is not a rounding issue. That divergence is the story. Hold on to this for a few minutes, because what the Attorneys General of New York and New Jersey are already investigating about FIFA's ticketing practices, combined with what FIFA's own platform revealed in the week before this tournament opened, puts the Guadalajara figure in a context that makes it considerably harder to dismiss as a routine administrative matter. The case for this being part of a pattern running through the entire competition becomes clearer the more of it you see laid out together. Starting with the cameras makes sense because that evidence belongs to every viewer who watched the match. The broadcast FIFA controls, produced by the crew FIFA approves, delivered live to millions of football fans worldwide, showed the ground clearly. Upper sections carrying visible rows of empty seats, patches of the stadium where seats outnumbered people, and a general atmosphere that did not match the noise or energy of a venue 1% away from a sellout. Analysts who follow attendance data professionally weighed in. Supporters who had attended previous matches at Akron confirmed what the broadcast had already shown. Footage uploaded from inside the ground aligned with every frame the cameras had captured. Through all of it, the official figure held at 44,985. And accepting that number requires believing the visible empty stands represented fewer than 700 people distributed across a 45,000-seat venue, that what appeared on camera as substantial vacant sections fits within a 0.6% no-show rate, and that a stadium generating that kind of broadcast imagery was simultaneously one of the best-attended fixtures at the tournament. None of that lines up with what the cameras documented, and the question that follows is where a number like 44,985 actually comes from, because the answer explains everything downstream. FIFA does not count the people who walked through the turnstiles and use that as the official attendance. This detail almost never appears in coverage of the figures themselves, and it matters more than almost anything else in this conversation. FIFA's statistics are almost certainly built from tickets distributed across every category of recipient, tickets allocated to corporate sponsors for hospitality suites, tickets sent to national federations, credentials issued to broadcast crews and media delegations, tickets provided to player families and official guests, and tickets sold to paying fans who then decided not to show up. Distributed means issued, not present, and the space between those two words is where empty seats go to disappear from the official record. When a corporate sponsor holds 300 hospitality tickets and 200 of those seats go unused because the account managers who were supposed to fill them could not make the trip, all 300 of those tickets still count in the distributed total. The seats stay empty, and the official figure treats them as occupied. When a national federation receives an allocation for a match where neither of their teams is playing, and the tickets go unclaimed because supporters have no reason to travel, those seats register in the attendance record regardless of whether anyone sits in them. A standard no-show rate of 5% across a large venue is normal and expected at any major sporting event, and 5% of 45,664 amounts to roughly 2,280 people, a gap that leaves a ground looking packed rather than producing the stretching visible sections the cameras captured in Guadalajara. What appeared on that broadcast was not within the range that distributed ticket accounting typically generates, and the comparison that brings this into focus is a direct one. When a major stadium reports a figure and the broadcast shows a packed ground with crowd noise matching the number, those two things reinforce each other, and nobody has reason to question the count. When FIFA reports 44,985 at Estadio Akron and the cameras showed what they showed, those two things are pointing in opposite directions, and a statistic that diverges from observable visual evidence at that scale is not a routine variance in methodology. Here is where this becomes much larger than one afternoon in Guadalajara, because the pattern of empty seats at this tournament was already on the public record before the opening ceremony took place. City officials in Arlington, Texas, part of the Dallas metropolitan area, received a briefing in the final weeks before the tournament that more than 350,000 tickets for matches at AT&T Stadium remained unsold. And with the stadium configured for over 100,000 people per World Cup fixture across 9 scheduled matches, the unsold fraction sat somewhere between 35% and 50% at the time that figure was delivered to the City Council. A shortfall of 350,000 seats across 9 matches in one host city is not something a late sales push can realistically close, and that number arrived in a city that had committed years of infrastructure investment based on projections of a venue running at or near capacity. On June 6th, 5 days before the tournament opened, England played a warm-up match at Raymond James Stadium in Tampa, Florida, and 13,000 tickets had been sold in a venue holding 69,000, meaning more than 50,000 seats went unfilled for an England football match in an American city less than a week before the World Cup began. The contrast between 13,000 in Tampa and the 80,000 who attended England matches at home that same year measures the distance between where supporters wanted to be and where the tournament's pricing and logistics had placed them. Average resale prices for group stage matches dropped 23% in a single month. 87 of the 91 available fixtures saw their entry price fall on the secondary market, and European airline bookings to the United States for July 2026 came in 14% below the previous year's levels, in a year when the weaker dollar made the trip cheaper in currency terms than it had been recently. Across all 11 American host cities, 80% of hotel operators reported booking levels below their initial forecasts, not a cluster of underperforming locations, but the clear majority of accommodation providers across every city the tournament was using. The secondary market, which prices based on actual buyer behavior rather than institutional projections, was communicating the state of demand honestly, while official communications maintained a different picture. Into all of that, FIFA published 44,985 for a match in Guadalajara. This is where a legal dimension enters the story and changes its weight considerably. The Attorneys General of New York and New Jersey opened a formal investigation into FIFA's ticketing practices before the tournament began, with their subpoenas naming a specific concern: the artificial management of ticket inventory to create a false impression of demand. Analysts tracking FIFA's official platform in the days before the opening match documented something with no plausible innocent explanation attached to it. Roughly 74,000 tickets appeared as available on the platform on a given day, and within a short period that number fell to 44,000, then dropped further to under 30,000, without any wave of fan purchases accounting for the reduction. The analyst running the tracking service stated directly that no scenario existed in which fans had bought 40,000 tickets in that window, that something else had caused the inventory to disappear from public view, and that the most likely explanations pointed toward either a mass reallocation to corporate partners or a deliberate withdrawal designed to make the tournament appear more sold out than it actually was. FIFA issued no explanation. The inventory simply became invisible to anyone looking for tickets on the official platform, and the investigators already focused on demand manipulation had a fresh data point to work with. Around the same time, roughly 60 supporters completed purchases through FIFA's official website and were charged nothing, receiving official purchase confirmations with assigned seats through a checkout process FIFA's own system had processed and approved. FIFA subsequently contacted each of those supporters and gave them 7 days to pay the original asking price or forfeit their tickets entirely, which meant a governing body reversing confirmed transactions and chasing 60 individual fans for a platform error of its own making. At the exact moment, World Cup final tickets sat on FIFA's own resale marketplace at $2,299,998.85 per seat. 4 seats available side by side behind the goal at MetLife Stadium in New Jersey, listed at over $2 million each on a platform FIFA operated and approved. The attorneys general building a case around artificial demand perception now had a live, documented attendance figure from Guadalajara, contradicting broadcast evidence that millions of viewers had already seen, and that figure sits alongside the disappearing inventory, the reversed $0 transactions, and the multi-million-dollar resale listings as part of the same body of evidence pointing in the same direction. The stakes beyond the embarrassment of a single statistic are worth stating plainly. FIFA's projected revenue from the 2026 World Cup stands at $11 billion, and that money flows from broadcast contracts, sponsorship agreements, and hospitality packages, all priced on the basis of what the purchasing parties believe they are receiving. Association with a packed, energetic stadium full of engaged fans, and the atmosphere the broadcast conveys to the global audience those partners paid to reach. Sponsors do not pay for empty seats. They pay for the energy of a full ground, and the gap between what the official attendance claims and what the cameras showed is a gap between the product FIFA sold and the product it delivered. Host cities carry a version of the same concern through their budgets. Arlington committed public resources based on visitor projections that never arrived. Toronto's commercial team was still working to close budget shortfalls in the days before the opening match. Seattle had projected 17% higher international visitor numbers than it was actually tracking by the time the tournament began. Vancouver and Toronto both entered FIFA's contract structure, which placed financial risk with the cities while directing revenue toward FIFA, and that structure was justified in part by the economic return of filling those venues with hundreds of thousands of visiting fans. When the stadium in a host city operates at a fraction of what the official figure claims, the economic argument FIFA used to bring those cities into the agreement looks different from inside a city budget office than it did during the bidding process. The only party whose position improves with an inflated attendance figure is FIFA, and that observation follows directly from where the financial incentives sit. Here is the number FIFA wants on the record: 44,985, a near sellout at one of the great venues of this World Cup, 99.4% full, a successful afternoon in Guadalajara as part of the greatest football competition in history. And here is what the broadcast cameras, the photographs from inside Estadio Akron, and the accounts of people who were physically present in Guadalajara on that afternoon collectively describe: a stadium with visible, stretching, documented empty sections that genuine 99.4% occupancy cannot produce. An $11 billion tournament could not fill a 45,664-seat ground in Mexico, and rather than acknowledge that reality, FIFA published a figure that says the problem does not exist. The gap is not 679 seats. The gap is the distance between an institution and the account of itself it has decided to maintain. If you have watched this far, this channel operates without a press credential to protect or a broadcast deal to maintain, and that independence is the only reason this conversation is happening. Subscribing takes about 3 seconds and is the most direct way to make sure this kind of coverage continues. The tournament is still running, and FIFA will keep releasing official attendance figures for every remaining fixture, which means every viewer now has something specific to check against the broadcast. When FIFA announces a venue as 98% full, check the upper sections, look at the corners, watch whether the atmosphere on screen matches the number in the press release. The camera does not revise its output after the match ends. The official attendance record sometimes does. The New York and New Jersey investigation continues alongside the football. Attendance figures that diverge from broadcast evidence are precisely what investigators focused on artificial demand management need, and the question of what FIFA will say when asked directly, not in a prepared statement, but in a live exchange, about whether 44,985 means tickets distributed or people confirmed inside Estadio Akron at kickoff, has not been answered with any specificity. If the answer turns out to be distributed tickets, that answer belongs next to the broadcast footage from Guadalajara until someone explains how those two things can be reconciled. Football at this level has always carried two stories at once: the game on the pitch, which involves players of genuine ability producing the moments the sport was built to create, and the institution running everything around it, which is projecting $11 billion in revenue, released an attendance figure that millions of television viewers immediately recognized as inconsistent with the broadcast they had just watched, and is operating under formal legal investigation in 2 American states while pursuing 60 supporters over a platform error on the same marketplace where final tickets were listed at over $2 million per seat. Both stories are real, and both are running simultaneously, and the 44,985 figure from Guadalajara carries a shadow considerably larger than the number itself suggests. Whether FIFA addresses it directly or waits for the final whistle at MetLife Stadium to drown out the question is the next thing worth watching.